When I tell you that this is the most disturbing missing persons case, I 100% mean it. Because you don't just go missing after jet skiing with a creepy man that you just met on vacation. 14-year-old Max DeVries went missing while on vacation with his family in Aruba back in 2004. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance are bizarre. And I've talked about his disappearance once before, but it's insane that more people don't know about it. Nothing has disturbed me more than learning about what happened to him, and the fact that the people responsible have probably gone on to hurt so many other victims. So let's talk about it. Part of the reason why this story is so horrifying is because in 2002, just 2 years before Max would vanish, his dad would suddenly die after having a heart attack. This would leave Max's mom to raise her 2 children alone, which is already devastating enough. But fast forward to May of 2004. The DeVries family, which now consisted of Yvonne, her son, 14-year-old Max, and his younger sister Dominique, were trying to put their lives back together and get used to the new normal without their dad. So to take their mind off things, they decided to plan a fun family vacation to Aruba, and tagging along was Max's aunt. Yvonne said their aunt came with them to have extra eyes on the kids and just for extra support since Yvonne was still reeling from the loss of her husband. They all stayed at the La Cabana Resort, and they were all so excited to hang out on the beach and play in the water. Growing up, they had a sailboat, so Max specifically loved the water and knew how to swim very well. A few days into their arrival, Max was playing pool at the resort when, seemingly out of nowhere, a man in his 30s approached him. To avoid being sued, I'm not going to give his full name, but his first name is David. So David starts playing pool with Max, and at first it seems a little weird to Yvonne how friendly he was being with him. But then again, it was a resort where everyone was really nice to each other, so this wasn't really any cause for concern. The man then started telling Max and his family about how he was also on vacation with his adoptive father, and they were celebrating the day he was adopted so many years ago as a kid. The adoptive father is also named David, so from here on out, I'll refer to them as David Jr. and David Sr. So anyway, David Sr. then joins everyone, asking about what all they had planned for the next day. Yvonne tells him that she and her family are going parasailing, and David Sr. asks if they can join them because that sounded really fun, so Yvonne, being nice, says yes. The next day came and went, and everyone had a good time together. They all went parasailing, and then David Jr. takes Max out on a couple of rented jet skis. They came back, and Max said he had fun, and that was that. They weren't really planning on hanging out with the 2 men again, but then the next day, as the family was hanging out by the pool, David Sr. approached them. He then asked Max in front of Yvonne if he wants to go out jet skiing again. Yvonne tells him no because he just did it the day prior, but he insists, saying that he really wants Max to go and that he'd even pay for it. And Max, being a kid, was really excited and begged his mom to let him go. So eventually, Yvonne said yes, even though she really didn't want him to. The last time Max was ever seen alive was getting on a jet ski and following David Sr. out onto the water, and what happened after this has never really been explained. So the jet ski rental was only supposed to last 45 minutes, but over an hour goes by and Max and David Sr. are still not back yet. So Yvonne starts to worry and heads down to the beach. But to her surprise, there were people already trying to look for the 2 with binoculars. This is when things start to get strange. In a panic, Yvonne goes back to the resort and tells management that her son is missing and that he was last seen with this strange older man that is also staying at this resort. So management then goes to the men's room and starts knocking on the door in hopes of finding David Jr. inside, but nobody answers the door. So authorities were notified and a search and rescue boat was sent out to try and find them. In the distance, Yvonne could see the boat coming back, but mysteriously, only one person was on the boat, and it was David Sr. Max was nowhere to be found. What's odd is that this entire time that they were looking for the 2, David Jr. was mysteriously missing as well, and he only showed back up when his dad was being rescued and being brought back to shore. When Yvonne asked him where he had been because they were looking for him, he said that he had passed out drunk in his room and didn't hear anyone knocking. When David Sr. was brought back to shore, he was mysteriously covered in scratches all over his neck and arms, and when asked about what happened, his answer was truly disturbing. David Sr. said that he and Max went out to a sandbar a few miles away and decided to get off their jet skis. When they tried to leave, their jet skis wouldn't turn back on, so Max tied them together so they wouldn't float away. But as he was doing this, he said that he heard a loud thump, and when he looked around, he saw Max floating away. He said that was the last he ever saw of Max, and that he didn't try to help him or anything. Because of the scratches all over him, the Aruban police brought him in for questioning, and his story started to not add up. David Sr. first told police that Max let go of the jet skis and started swimming to shore, but he then changed his story entirely. He was just very calmly floating away, like he didn't even try to swim. The man said he tried calling out to him, but Max wasn't responding, although he said his eyes were open. It was very obvious obvious that he was lying and hiding something, so Yvonne asked authorities to check under his fingernails to see if they could find any DNA, or to possibly give him a lie detector test. But Aruban police told her no, that this isn't America and that they don't do things like that. When asked about how he got those scratches, David Sr. said that he got them from trying to climb back on his jet ski. It's weird because he had done this before, like he wasn't new to riding jet skis, but his entire neck and both of his arms were literally covered in scratches. That doesn't just happen by simply trying to get back on a jet ski, I'm sorry. Although this man was clearly hiding something, the police let him go and pretty much just believed every word he said. Although a massive search was launched by boat and air, Max was never found. Authorities stated that Max was lost at sea, that this was all just a tragic accident, and they eventually stopped searching for him. There really wasn't much that Yvonne could do as authorities weren't helping her, so she and her daughter had to go back home without Max. One thing that really stood out to me though was that on the flight home, the two men were actually sitting behind Yvonne, and David Sr. said something to her that is honestly really sinister. He asked Yvonne if he could send her flowers on Max's missing anniversary. Who says something like that? After this, Yvonne never saw those two men again. After going home, Yvonne did everything she could to try and get media attention for Max's disappearance, but this was quickly overshadowed by the disappearance of Natalie Holloway, who also went missing in Aruba just a year after Max, and news of her disappearance was everywhere, like you couldn't turn on a TV without hearing about it. Not too long after this, a local police detective near Yvonne's home in Michigan decided to take on Max's case. It didn't take him long while researching Max's case to immediately figure out something horrible happened to him, and that it wasn't just an accident. He started reviewing the statements given by David Sr. in Aruba and noticed how his story didn't add up. So he decided to run a background check on him, and what he found is horrifying. He found that David Sr. was arrested in 1981 for sexually abusing another 14-year-old boy, the same age as Max. But this wasn't just any random 14-year-old boy. It was his own adoptive son, David Jr., who was the one traveling with him in Aruba. This was a major red flag to the detective, because if he was arrested for assaulting his own son, why were they now still in contact and traveling together? So then he started going through David Jr.'s statements given in Aruba, and he found that he lied about something major. He said that his dad had never been arrested, which obviously was not true because he had personally been a victim of his own dad and knew he was arrested for it. Then he started oversharing a bunch of really odd information, saying how he's 100% heterosexual and had never done anything intimate with a boy or man. This was all voluntarily said by him, which was weird. This detective got the FBI to briefly investigate this case, and they actually brought David Jr. in for questioning. He of course denied having anything bad to do with Max's disappearance, and he stood on the fact that it was just a tragic accident. So the FBI offered him to take a polygraph test, in which he agreed, and he was scheduled to take it the following day. But not so shockingly, he never showed up. I guess the FBI was eventually taken off this case because they were assigned to a bigger case, but they believed that these two men were working together to target other young boys. They believed that David Jr. was used to groom Max into creating a friendship bond, and then when David Sr. took Max out to the sandbar, he had his son meet him out there so that they could both assault Max and kill him. And that's why David Sr. was covered in scratches, because Max fought for his life. Despite how obvious it was that Max was met with foul play, his case would soon fall cold, and no movement would happen until April of 2016. One day, seemingly out of the blue, Yvonne gets a message from a woman asking to talk about Max. The woman doesn't want to be named publicly for fear of her safety, but she goes on to tell Yvonne that she dated David Jr. recently for a year. She said that one day, she, David Jr., and his dad were all sitting in the living room when his dad suddenly blurted out, quote, "Hey, has he ever mentioned anything about the 14-year-old who went missing in Aruba?" End quote. The woman says no because David Jr. had never mentioned anything about it before, and his dad said that his son was really close with the boy and it hurt him a lot when he went missing. Later that night, the woman asked David Jr. what happened that day in Aruba, which made him incredibly mad. He yelled at her to never mention him ever again. Apparently this woman had a son from a previous relationship, and she said that after this interaction, she started paying attention to how David Sr. would act around her son. She said he got really close with her son and always wanted him to sit on his lap. She She left after this and decided to Google missing 14-year-old boy in Aruba and found Max's story. She then reached out to Yvonne wanting to somehow help. This is when Yvonne found yet another girl this man had dated and had reached out to her as well. This woman said that on one occasion, David Jr. told her that the only good thing his father had ever done for him was get him out of trouble in Aruba. She said that David Jr. would sleep talk and say Max's name, and one night she confronted him about it, asking who Max was. He then snapped and held her at gunpoint, strangling and stabbing her, but somehow the woman was able to escape and survive this attack. David Jr. was arrested for this, but somehow he only ever got 2 years probation for literal attempted murder. It's now been 20 years, and Max has never been found. The two men have never been charged in connection to this case, although the way I see it is that there are two people in this entire world who know exactly what happened to him. Max's mom is here on TikTok trying to get some focus back on his case, so please go and follow her and show her your support. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is worse than having a child go missing and decades later still not having any answers. But it's now been 21 years, and what exactly happened to Max that day in Aruba remains a mystery.